Hello, Keith Rucker here at VintageMachinery.org. Guys, today I'm working on a little project for a fellow YouTuber out there, Andy Rawls, who has a channel that is mostly about woodworking, has a really big following, does a really good job. I've actually watched a bunch of his videos over the years. And a while back, Andy purchased a Oliver Pattern Makers Vise to go on a woodworking bench. These are really great vices. I have an Emirate Pattern Makers Vise over on my woodworking bench that I absolutely love. These things, you can rotate them around to all kinds of different uh, places and different shapes and different configurations to pretty much clamp whatever you might be working on a bench with woodworking. Um, they're made by several different companies. Like I said, this one was made by Oliver. The one I have is made by Emirate. They're very similar. They're not identical, but very similar in how they work and everything else. But while he was working on his, he's actually got a video of him installing this or trying to install it on his woodworking bench. And he had the vise, this jaw of the vise sitting up on the bench while he was working on the bench, doing some chiseling and trying to get set up to mount. And the vibration of the bench, this thing just fell right off on the ground, hit the concrete floor, and it broke into a couple of pieces. Andy was devastated, as I would have probably been too, but trying to salvage a bad situation, he reached out to me and asked if I could possibly help him try to do a repair on this. And I'm going to say attempt. This is going to be a tough repair. We got cast iron, very difficult to weld, very difficult to do much with. We've got a very thin cross section, and we've got the end of the vise that gets a lot of pressure on it. So that you're very likely that it could break again in the future. I told him we'd give it a try. I'm not going to make any promises. I think that we can do a pretty good repair on this, and I got an idea on how we can strengthen this and make it a little bit stronger too, that we're going to explore as we get into this. But anyway, that is what we're doing. Let me kind of zoom in here, show you what we got, talk about our game plan, and then let's get in here and execute that game plan and see if we can get this thing repaired. So guys, as you can see, we got a nice clean break right across the back of this thing where it hit the ground, and that thin cross section, it just cracked right down it. Not pretty at all. The good news is that it does appear to be a fairly clean break. I don't see a lot of splintering, a lot of cracks going off in different directions. There is one little hairline crack that I see right in this area, although I don't see it on the other side. It's probably there, but can't really see it. But that's good, and I think that we can try to fix this. When you kind of put it back together, it fits together very nicely, nice and tight, which is also, again, kind of a good situation to be working with. Game plan. I'm going to braze this back together using brass or bronze brazing rods. This is cast iron. Cast iron is a difficult material to weld, repair, whatever you want to call it. And I've talked about this. I've done a lot of cast iron repairs over the years, and I really prefer brazing cast iron over other methods of cast iron repair. Yes, you can come in here with a nickel electrical welding rod and weld this together and do a good job with it. But it's tricky. It's really difficult to do. It takes a very experienced welder to do that. There's a lot of preheating involved, a lot of slowing down, or slowly cooling down, a tongue twister there, to make it work right. And I'll be honest with you, I have not personally had good experience with it. There are other guys out there that are very good at it and have had excellent experience with it. What I have had very good experience with is brazing. And again, with brazing, we're going to use brass melted in here, so dissimilar material. But if you look at the specs on brazing, a good repair job done with brazing on cast iron is really about as strong as the cast iron is by itself. It's a very good option, and it's one that I like, and it's one that we're going to use here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to come in here and we're going to V out a good bit of this material, probably about half of the material in here, going down through this cross section. And then we're going to clamp it down. I've got this cast iron plate that, this is an old surface plate. It's in really, really rough shape. I mean, this thing is not any good as a surface plate. It's been welded up here and whatever. I'm not worried about this thing being super flat. It's beyond that without remachining it and re-scraping it and all that kind of stuff, which I may do one day, but right now I'm not worried about it. And I know a lot of people say, oh, you don't want to heat the metal up because it'll distort it. The nice thing about cast iron is that cast iron, if it's flat at a certain temperature and you heat it up, heat does not distort it. It will distort it while it's hot, but it will go back to being flat again once it gets to a normalized temperature, a uniform temperature throughout. If this plate was 32 degrees Fahrenheit and it was flat and you heated it up evenly to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, it would still be flat. Now, if it was 32 degrees over here and 100 degrees over here, yeah, you'd have distortion in it. But cast iron is a very stable material, which is why it was used in a lot of machinery and machinery bases and stuff like that. It's actually more stable than steel, and it's a superior platform for steel. The downside to cast iron is it's brittle, and as in the case here, when he dropped it on the floor, it broke. So we're going to try to fix that. Once I get it V'd out, we're going to clamp it down to this plate to kind of help keep this thing flat while we are brazing it. Then once we get through, we'll wrap this thing up with a fire blanket, let it cool down really, really slow. I'll also heat it up fairly slowly and uniformly and try to get a lot of heat in the whole part. We're going to actually get a lot of heat in this table itself, which is why I have it up on a fire blanket. There's actually fire bricks up underneath this to create a temperature gap between it and my welding bench. I don't want this welding bench serving as a big, huge heat sink while I'm doing this. I got much smaller mass here, still a lot of mass, but much smaller mass than my welding table. So that's kind of the game plan. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this over probably first to the wire wheel, kind of clean it up, try to get as much of this oxidation and paint and all the other impurities off as I can. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of use a grinder or whatever and V that thing out. We'll come over here and clamp it down and see if we can braze this thing back together. So hopefully you can see I got in here with the wire wheel and tried to clean up as much of that whatever I could get off of that, especially right there in the area where we're going to be brazing. And again, the whole purpose of that is just to make sure I keep as many impurities out of this as possible. This thing has years of paint, dirt, dust, grease, and just oxidation on it, and all those impurities can really impact the quality of that braze job that we're going to do in there. So as clean as we can get it, the better. And it's kind of hard to get in, particularly on this side with this column up here, but we got it. I got at least the area where we're going to be working done. I'm pretty happy with that. Next, what we're going to do is we're just going to come in here with a grinder and kind of V that out. All right, I've got about halfway down on this side, and what that's going to allow me to do here is when we put this back together, it leaves a nice place for that braze to flow into. I'm going to do the same thing on this side, but it's also leaving enough of the cast iron in there for it to kind of register back together and fit up tightly against, so that when we clamp it together, it's exactly where it needs to go. So I'm going to do the same thing on this other side, and we'll bring you back when we're done here. So here we go. I think we've got things ready to go ahead and start brazing. I've got everything V'd out. We got a nice place to lay that braze down into. And I've got everything clamped down to this plate where it's up here tight, it's square, and it's clamped down flat to this plate, which will hopefully help keep it flat while we're doing this braze repair. I've got 2 clamps clamping this piece down and 1 big clamp in the center, just kind of clamping all this down to this plate, which is fairly flat. I mean, it was a surface plate at one time, so it should be a nice, good reference surface. And I think what we're ready to do now is get the torch out and start preheating this part to get some heat in here. Now, in a lot of welding shops, they have an oven that you can put this in and kind of heat up everything to get it preheated. That's the ideal way of doing it. I just don't have an oven in my shop that I can do that on. So we're just going to have to take the torch. I'll put a rosebud on it, and we're going to try to heat everything up. And when I say everything, I'm not just trying to heat up this area. I want to get all this whole plate hot so that we don't have huge temperature differences going on here. Again, that will make things kind of get out of whack and not be flat. I won't have everything at brazing temperature, but if I can get it all real nice and hot, it will stay pretty flat. It should stay pretty flat, and we should have a good braise here. So let me go get my torch set up, and we'll get started on that. All right, here we go. I've got a rosebud tip in here right now. This is just putting a lot of heat on everything, and like I mentioned a while ago, my goal right now is I just want to slowly and gradually warm this part up, including the plate that it's on, and try to do it somewhat evenly. This is going to take a little time, but we've got time to kill, so I am going to take my time and get it up to temperature. Heating it up evenly like this is very important. If we concentrate all of our heat just right here, it's going to be cold down there, and this part is going to get a lot of stress in it. Be more prone to cracking, and just having a bad joint is going to be more prone to not being flat when we get through. So this is going to take a little while. This is probably going to take 15-20 minutes to kind of get it up to temperature. Once we get it up to temperature, we'll start concentrating our heat in the area where we want to actually do the braise. So we'll be back in a little bit after we get this thing warmed up. All right, we are getting up the temperature here. I've actually got up on the top there is kind of turning red, and I'm seeing a little bit of color change down here in the bottom. I've still got that cast iron block up underneath it, which is serving as a heat sink, but we're slowly getting it warmed up. I'm actually probably not very far from being able to braise this bottom right now, and we do have heat all the way around. I've got a infrared thermometer here, and yeah, we're running about 800 degrees out here on the plate, and we're probably right at about 1,000 degrees right down there in the area where we want to braise. So we're getting close. So here in just a minute, I'm going to change tips on this torch. I've got this big rosebud on here right now, putting a lot of heat into this part. And honestly, this rosebud's a little bit too big to braise with. I will braise with a rosebud. I got a smaller rosebud tip that I'm probably going to use on this one. I've got some brazing tips as well, but because of the mass involved here, I really need to keep a rosebud on it just to keep so much heat going into it. But this one's a little bit on the big side. So I can start to see the color change down there in the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and change tips. All right, so still a rosebud, but a much smaller one. This will give me a lot more control. And I'm going to concentrate my heat now in this area where I want to start my braise job. And what I want to do is I want to kind of get that bottom area where I want to lay that braise in to a cherry red color. That'll be enough to melt that braise and let it kind of flow down in there. And then we can just kind of move down this part. I don't know how well you can see this in the camera. I can see it pretty good just looking at it here. But we're getting real close to brazing temperature right now. I'm going to grab a brazing rod. You can kind of see it down in there. A little more heat down that area where I'm going to start out. And I'm going to introduce some brazing rod in there and let it just kind of flow down in there. Just going to kind of work my way down, filling this braise in as I go. more heat. I'm using a brazing rod here that has flux built in on it. This is basically just a bronze or brass alloy. I don't want to get it in there too cold, so I'm going to kind of get up here ahead of where I'm going and make sure that we're at that brazing temperature before I introduce the bronze. There we go again. All right, I'm pretty happy with the way that's looking on the bottom here. What I want to do, we're going to have some grinding work in there to clean all that up, but what I want to do is go ahead and take this apart. We're going to flip it over. We're going to grind out the other side and go ahead and try to get that side brazed up while it's still hot, while we got some heat still in this part. Whew, these clamps are hot. All right, let's see if I can handle this here with some pliers. And what I want to do is just kind of set this up like this right here. I'm going to get my grinder. We're going to open up that crack and continue brazing. Start heating again. And I think we're done. So let me kind of clean up my table over here. We're going to wrap this thing up and just let her cool down real slow. Just going to take this blanket, wrap it up, and I got another blanket over here we're going to put on there too. These are welding blankets. They're made for holding this heat in like this. So we're just going to put these on here, and that will insulate this and hopefully let it cool down very slowly, which is what we're wanting here, so that we don't get any stress fractures in there. We'll leave her sitting there, come check her on her after a while. I let this cool down all night long, so it is the next day out here in the shop. So we're going to unwrap this thing. Yeah, it has cooled down nicely. And we're going to take a look at what we got. Looks like we got a pretty good braze. Let me get a wire wheel, and I'm going to clean this up and probably go ahead and hit it with a flap wheel as well to kind of clean it up a little bit. Start by wire wheeling this. I just got a twisted knot wire wheel on an angle grinder here. It doesn't look too bad. Get on the other side here and clean this up a little bit. Can't really get down in here with that wire wheel, but I got a little wire wheel on a drill here. I'll get down here and work on this. It's a lot of flux that kind of makes like a glass-like surface in here, and I want to try to get that flux out of there. Just clean it up as good as I can. Just got a sandpaper flap wheel, and I want to try to knock down some of the brass that's on the top here. I really don't want to get into the cast iron. I'm going to do that on a machine to even this up, but I do want to try to just knock down some of the high spots. I'm trying to get in here and break up this kind of glass from the flux, and I can't get in there. What I'm going to do is use a needle scaler. This is a little air-powered tool. It has these little probes, and they just kind of pound in there, and that should hopefully break it up. I think that got most of it out of there. My next step here is I want to get this whole surface flat again. And I've thought about several ways of doing this, but I think what we're going to try to do is just use this big belt sander. I've got this big Porter cable belt sander, and it's got a plating behind it that's flat. And the idea here is that we'll just come in here and basically just touch off on this whole face. I'll probably flip it around several times and different angles and what have you, and try to just get this all cleaned up where we have a nice flat face and make sure we don't have any irregularities in there. That's the game plan. If this looks like it's not going to work, I do have a plan B that's going to be a little bit more involved, but I think that this will get the job done. So let's try it out. Just thought I'd give you a little quick view of what's going on here. This appears to be working very good. I've still got a little bit more I need to take off, but I wanted to kind of show you this pattern. We've kind of got a hole right here where it's not perfectly flat, and a little bit over here. It looks like whenever this was brazed, this end came up just a little bit. It's not by a bunch, but we've still got to get a little bit out in there to get that little hole done and this little hole done over here. I'm not removing very much metal off of this at all. I know it looks like a lot, but it's really not. We're just going to keep working on it till we get a good finish from one end to the other and have it all flat again. It's probably fine like it is right now, but me being a perfectionist, I'm going to try to go a little bit farther here. So I'm going to continue on. I'll bring you back when we get done and show you the final results. All right, guys, I am pretty happy with the way this is turning out. I did do a little bit more sanding over here on this side. I didn't want to take any more metal off this than I had to. There's a couple little gaps in here. I don't think it's going to matter. Like there's a little bit of a spot here, although I could see that the sanding marks were kind of starting to hit the top of some of those mill marks. Same thing over here, a little bit of a recess, but I mean, it's pretty small. I think it's going to be fine for, you know, a woodworking vise, which what this is. We don't have to have a super precision flat surface. This isn't something that's going to be a reference surface being used as a surface plate. So it's probably as flat now as it was when it was new. Next thing I want to do is we're going to flip this over. You probably noticed there's these little recesses on each side. This is for a dog, a little clamping dog to go into. This is one of them. There's two of them, one on each side. And this is the unbroken side. This has got a little spring in it. It's square, it fits in. Get that thing going. There we go. And it's designed where you can slide that up and you've got a little clamping surface that you can clamp on 4 points here. So again, this is the dog that goes in this side, and it is a little bit tight. I got a little braze in there. I mean, it starts to go in. I want to clean that up a little bit. I've got some files here, and I'm just going to get in here and start working on that, cleaning it up, and do a little massaging so that will go in all the way. And I'm going to do that off camera. You guys probably don't want to see me file. This is going to take a little bit of time, but I'm going to get that to where it fits in. All right, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It cleaned up real easy. But this will go right in here, all the way across to the back. And it just captures in there. And again, you can slide it up when you need it. When it's not in use, it's down. You got a little tab on the bottom. You can press that up and get those out when you need them. And that fits good. For all intent purposes, the repair part is complete on this vise. I've talked with Andy though, and we're going to go one step further here to try to make sure that this thing really holds up well. And I think this is optional, but it's not going to hurt anything, and it's really not going to interfere with the function of the vise much either. If you look, there's these 4 slots on here where you can put a screw in here to put a face on this vise. This is designed for really putting a piece of wood in here to give kind of soft jaws. You can put them on both sides very easily, and it would just help cushion your wood. The downside to putting a face on this is that for this particular jaw, this is the fixed jaw on the vise, there's this slot back here, and there was an optional tilting vise piece that fit into this piece here. Once you put that on there, this is not, you can't access it. I think Andy has that function, but he said he probably won't use it that much, and if he needed to use it, he could just take the face off. So instead of using wood though, what I've done is I've gone out and I've actually cut a piece of plate steel here. This is a 1/4 inch thick. I took it over to a local shop that has a CNC torch or a plasma cutter, I think is actually what it is. And they cut this out, and we're going to mount this on here, and we'll actually bolt it in place. And we'll have the mechanical fasteners holding it in place. It's removable. It's not gonna, we're not gonna permanently affix this on here. We're not gonna try to weld it on or anything like that, but just having this solid plate on here, I think will give a lot of rigidity. And even though I think this repair is probably gonna be good enough, it won't risk putting too much pressure on this end piece down here and snapping it back off again. So let's get this mounted on there. I've got the vise sitting on top of the plate. Everything's centered up. I got clearance from my little square shaft to go through here. And what I've got is I got my set of transfer punches. This is a center punch, but they come in fractional sizes so that you can go down an existing hole and center punch something. I'm just going to come in here and we're going to kind of go right up in that corner. And this is going to position where my holes need to be using the vise here as a template. So now with that done, what I can do is I'm going to go drill these out, and we're going to put a bolt in there to hold it in place. Countersunk screw, actually. So I went and drilled, countersunk. I just used a countersink like this to get the heads in there, and this will allow a screw to be in there but below the surface. And what we're going to do is just go around here and put one of these screws in each one of these holes, get everything lined up. There we go. And on the back side, I'm going to put a washer, and I'm going to use a square-headed nut just to kind of give it that vintage look. Not really required, but I think it'll make it look a little bit nicer, even though I think this is the side that's going to be hidden from view, but oh well, that's what we're going to put on here. I think we are done here. So this is the back side. You can see the braze repair in there. I imagine he's probably going to paint this. I would if it was mine, but that looks fine. We flip it around to the other side. We got our new steel face jaw in there. And I think that's going to work just fine as well. So he should be ready to go. I'm going to get this packed up and sent back. So there we go. I think we are all finished up with this job. I am extremely happy with how this turned out. I hope Andy is as well. And I really do feel like this fix, even without the face on here, I think would probably be fine. But with this face on here, this thing should hold up forever, or at least until the next time he knocks it off the table and breaks it. Do it again, send it back. We'll fix it again, Andy. So with that, guys, that's going to be a wrap. If you're new to the channel, I know we probably got a lot of people over at Andy's group over there watching now. Please subscribe to my channel if you don't mind. If you like what you see here, I do this kind of work all the time, do restoration work on all kinds of vintage machinery and equipment. Hit that bell icon to get notifications when new videos are posted. Big, huge thank you to all the supporters out there who support the site through Patreon, PayPal, etc. I really could not do everything I do here without all of your help. And guys, with that, we'll catch you on the next video again. Thanks for watching.